previous lecture, we saw how to retrieve documents collection from Appwrite and populate our web page accordingly using that data. Now in this one, we'll be learning how we can get the details of a given document so that when we click on this one, we can retrieve the details of a given event. To do that, the first thing that we need to do in our code is head over to lib, and then inside that we have this file events.ts. Now in this, we will be creating a new method. Now that new method is going to take the event ID as the input parameter, and it will then use that to get the details from Appwrite. So I'll be just copying this whole piece of code and pasting it over here down below. Let's give it a name. We'll be calling it as get event by ID, and it will be expecting a parameter called event ID of type string. Now here it's going to return just one document, not a collection. So we'll say it as document, and we'll be making use of a new method. Instead of list documents, we'll call it as get document. Now this takes three parameters, the third one being the event ID over here in this case. So that's the doc ID or the unique ID using which we'll be getting the specific data. Now, other thing that I would like to highlight over here is that if you see here the return statement and the return that we are writing over here, it's like repeating the same thing a couple of times. So instead of that, we'll be creating a mapping function which will return an event model, and that will be consumed in these two functions. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, the first thing that we need to do is import models from Appwrite. Once that's done, here we have written this function map document to event, and then this document is of type models.document. And over here you can see that we have created the ID name location date mapping, and then it's returning the event. So our next step would be calling this map document to event method in get events as well as in get event by ID. So let's start doing that. Instead of this return, we'll be simply writing this events documents.map map document to event. Now the next step is to do the same with get event by ID. So over here, the next step would be writing this return statement, and here it will be event again, map document to event and document. So this time we have reused this map document to event and optimized our code as well. Now that we have created this method, we need to call it. Now if you see our index page, the main page where we are listing all these events, you'll find that the link that is coming up over here is a hard-coded link. So instead of this, we have to ensure that we pass the event ID so the data related to that event can be retrieved. So here we'll be getting rid of this hard-coded value, and we'll be providing the event ID. So we'll be writing event.$ID, and instead of this, we'll be converting it to a string literal like this. So we have the event and then the event ID. Now the next step is to create a detailed page where we can get this data displayed. What we'll do next is in our pages directory, we have this event, and you see this event ID within rectangular brackets. Now in this, the first thing that we'll be doing is making use of use state and use effect. So let's do that, and next is use state. After this, we also need to get the event model. So here in index, if you see, we have this get events and events model. We'll be just copying the same thing. We'll be going back to this particular file, and we'll be calling our event model. Now we'll be getting rid of the JSON file, and we'll be calling this method get event by IDs. So here we have the get event by ID included. Now the next step would be this function event that we have. So here earlier what we were doing was that we were taking the first item from the event.json and we were showing the details of it. But now we'll be creating a function called event, and this is going to expect a parameter. So here we'll say params. And here we'll be just logging it, the params that we are receiving. Now, next thing that we need to do is make use of the use state and use effect. And over here, as of now, we'll be getting rid of the image because that's something we are not retrieving from our Appwrite database. So we'll be commenting this one. And over here, we have the usual things like event name, date, location. Now, let's save this and head over to our main.tsx file. Over here, we have this route defined. So any event with an event ID will basically go to this component event. And if you see over here, this is the page that's getting called under pages. We have event. Go over here and select this and press F12. You'll be taken to the event ID.tsx component. So this is the page that gets called when we click on any of the event IDs. So here under main tsx, this is the route that we have defined. And this route that we have is basically coming from the router package. Let's go ahead and run this and see it in action. So here our site is running now. And over here, if I click on any of the events, in the bottom left corner, you can see the event IDs coming up. If I hover on any of these, let's click on the first one. And here you have the event detail, the name, date, and location coming up. And here in the URL, if you notice, this is the event. And under that, we have the ID of the event. And this basically gets mapped to event folder. And within that, this is the id.tsx. So for every ID, it's dynamically creating this page that we have over here.